Alright, so first we're going to start with the back squat. The primary muscle mover is going to be your quads, your glutes, and your hams. First, for our setup, you're going to want to approach the bar. Bar height should be just slightly lower than shoulders or at sternum. So our feet are going to be hip width apart, parallel. It's pretty good, I like that. Your hands are slightly wider than your shoulder width, and your shoulder girdle is retracted. The bar is resting on your traps. So for our eccentric movement, we're going to inhale while lowering. I want to hear you lower. I want to hear you breathe. So we're going through hip flexion followed by direct knee flexion while maintaining a nice neutral spine. On our concentric, we're going to be exhaling while rising, going through knee extension followed by hip extension while maintaining a nice neutral spine. So next is going to be our front squat. Primary muscle mover, your quads and your gluteus maximus. So for our setup, the bar setup is at the height of your mid-sternum or slightly lower than your shoulders. Your feet are going to be hip width apart as well as parallel. Index and pointer fingers as hooks, wider than shoulder width, and elbows pressed to the ceiling. Nice. So in our eccentric movement, we're going to be inhaling as you go through hip flexion, followed by knee flexion, while maintaining a nice neutral spine. And on your concentric, we're going to be exhaling as you go through knee extension, followed by hip extension, maintaining the neutral spine. So next, we have our box squat. The primary muscle mover is going to be our quadriceps and our gluteus maximus. For their setup, our bar height is just below shoulder height, resting on the trap. Your feet are underneath your hips, hip width apart, parallel. Okay, so on your eccentric phase, you're going to lower while inhaling, going through hip flexion, followed by direct knee flexion, maintaining a neutral spine. And on the concentric, you'll be exhaling while rising, going through knee extension, followed by hip extension, still maintaining a nice neutral spine. With your legs about 6 inches away from the bench. So next is our deadlift. It's going to be working the quadriceps, our gluteus maximus, and our hamstrings. So for our setup, our feet are hip width apart. Nice, I like that. They're parallel. Hands and shoulders. Hands are shoulder width apart. Your barbell close to the shins, hovering above the mid-lace. On our concentric phase, we're going to be exhaling as you go through knee extension and hip extension, rising, maintaining a neutral spine at all times. And on our eccentric, we're going to be inhaling as you go through hip flexion, followed by knee flexion, while still maintaining a nice neutral spine. So next we have a barbell bent over row. This is going to work a lot of our rhomboids and our latissimus dorsi. So for our setup, barbell is positioned underneath of our knees, hands wider than shoulder width apart, and feet directly under your hips and parallel, while maintaining a nice neutral spine. So on our concentric phase, you're going to be exhaling while rising the bar up. Shoulder girdles are retracting, and the hyperextension of the shoulder joint and elbow flexion. On our eccentric, we'll be inhaling, lowering the bar, the shoulder joint going through flexion, and the shoulder girdle protracting, while the elbow is extending.
We're going to be performing the one-arm dumbbell row to work the latissimus dorsi and the rhomboids in the back. So for the setup, we want to make sure one knee is on the bench while the other foot is flat on the floor. The hand on the opposite side of the weight, so your stability hand that's on the bench, should be flat and it should be directly underneath the shoulder joint. So on the concentric phase of the lift, Chandler is going to be exhaling while going through shoulder joint hyperextension and elbow flexion. His shoulder girdle will also be retracting in this phase. On the eccentric part of the lift, on the way down, he's going to be inhaling. His shoulder girdle will be going through protraction. His shoulder joint will be going through flexion, and his elbow will be going through extension. The next exercise we'll be performing is the pull-up. So for the setup phase, Chandler's going to be standing directly underneath the bar. He's going to start with his shoulder joint inflection as he grabs the bar with a pronated grip. And his hands are going to be shoulder width apart. So in the concentric phase, he's going to be exhaling as he goes through shoulder joint retraction, shoulder girdle retraction, shoulder joint extension, and elbow flexion. On the eccentric part of the lift, he's going to be inhaling as he lowers. His shoulder joint will be going through flexion on the way down. His elbows will be extending on the way down, and his shoulder girdle will be going through protraction. The next exercise we'll be performing is a chin-up. So this targets the latissimus dorsi and the rhomboids in your back. So the setup phase, again, he's going to be standing directly underneath the bar. He's going to start with his shoulder joint in flexion. His hands are going to be supinated this time, so his palms facing towards him. And his hands will be shoulder width apart on the bar. So on the concentric phase, he's going to be exhaling. His shoulder girdle will be going through retraction on the way up. His shoulder joint will be extending and his elbow will be flexing. On the eccentric part of the lift, he's going to be inhaling as he comes back down. His shoulder joint will be going through flexion. His shoulder girdle will be going through protraction, and his elbows will be extending on the way back down. The next exercise we'll be performing is the barbell bench press. This will target your pectoralis major and your triceps. So the setup phase, we want to make sure that the bar is at a height in which when you raise your hands up, it lays around your wrist. Your eyes should be directly underneath the bar. Your feet positioned firmly on the ground. And maintain a neutral spine by allowing the three necessary points of your spine, the lumbar, the thoracic, and the upper part of your neck to be touching the bench. So on the eccentric phase, on the way down, he's going to be inhaling. His hands are slightly wider than shoulder width. He's going to be going through shoulder joint extension and elbow flexion. On the way back up for the concentric phase of the lift, he's going to be exhaling as he pushes the bar. His hands are again slightly wider than shoulders. He'll be going through elbow extension and shoulder joint flexion during this concentric phase of the lift. All right, so Chandler's going to be performing a dumbbell bench press to target the pectoralis major and the triceps brachii. So in the setup phase, he's going to be lying flat on his bench. His feet are positioned firmly on the ground with his knee joint at about 90 degrees, as you can see here. His shoulder joint is going to be starting, so he's going to start with the weights raised up. Yeah, so in this position, his shoulder joint will be flexed and his elbows extended, and his hands are also in a pronated position. So on the eccentric phase, on the eccentric phase, he's going to be inhaling as he lowers the weight down, and he's going to be arcing the dumbbells on the way down. So he's going to be going through shoulder joint extension and elbow flexion. So on the way back up, the concentric phase, he's going to be exhaling as he raises and arches the dumbbells towards each other. His shoulder joint will be going through flexion, and his elbows will be extending at this phase.